Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park. I hope everyone managed to survive without us last week because we were all still traveling on Monday. So I suppose we could have tried to broadcast from the car, but I don't think it worked very well.
Especially since I think we were both dozing in and out.
Yeah, there's all that, snoring in the car thing.
Was I snoring?
I don't know, because I'm pretty sure I was.
I didn't hear you.
Okay, I know I woke myself up a few times, so
I hope Arno wasn't.
Oh, he was driving. That would have been bad. But it was cool because we had all of Beyond the Trailer Park with us in one place. But of course, because Beth, of course, is in Pennsylvania as usual. I should have just said hi.
Hi.
Morgan has to write an exam this week, so she's off doing law studenty things and trying to cram stuff in her brain. So we will see her next time, I'm sure. But for now, I'll just go ahead and introduce our guest before we get babbling away here. Welcome, Karen Garst. I forget what state you're in again, but
Oregon.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Excellent. Well, it's still daylight where you are, so
it's still sort of daylight here.
I know. I'm enjoying this whole not getting dark before the show starts, because this is the first year that we've been on at 7:30. Last when we started doing 7:30, I think it was the fall already.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, because you probably remember, Karen, when you were on before, we were on at 9:30 and we kind of backed it up a little bit.
Yep.
That's all right. Makes it a little easier for guests at times, I think. And then we're not drop dead when we're done. Which is good, because I apparently have to wash my bed again afterwards. I just did laundry yesterday and remade the bed. And right before the show started, my cat decided to throw up on the bed.
Oh, no.
I know. I'm like, oh, thank you so much.
Couldn't have done it the day before I was going to wash it.
Like when I got up yesterday before I did the laundry, you could have barfed on the bed, like what the hell? But no, she has to do it today when it's all nice and clean.
And speaking of bed, that made it over the border with mine.
I did,
and I'm liking. Well, the cat loves it. Liking having a bed again.
Yay!
Although I've fallen out twice.
Oh no!
I didn't quite wake myself up enough to roll over, and I kind of rolled out of the bed.
Oops. But yeah, we drove to pick up Beth in Pennsylvania with a twin bed in the back. I have a station wagon, so we drove with the bed in the back of the car and 5 boxes of bedding. And I hate to say it, but white privilege in action, because we get to the border and it's, where are you going? Who are you seeing? Blah, blah, blah. What's all that stuff? I'm like, I'm bringing my friend to bed. Oh, did she buy it? No. Okay, bye. Like, I fully expected to get hauled into secondary and searched and all that fun stuff, but no.
Yeah. And what's really bizarre is having a bed in your car, or on your car in some cases, is not real unusual around here. You'd be surprised how many times I see furnitures of various types going down the street and on the roadways around here. It's just really bizarre. Mostly in pickup trucks or half pickup trucks. It's like people don't even think, which is good. I mean, I love the fact that I was able to get a nice used bed, which I normally would not do. But yeah, I'm loving it.
We weren't using it. It was gonna sit in the attic. So, and the fun was my husband, because this is a twin bed, he's pretty sure that the like the mattress has obviously been replaced, but he's pretty sure that frame was the first bed that he got outside of a crib.
Yeah, you can tell Arno I still haven't gotten the frame quite together yet because I'm a lesbian with no tools. I have one screwdriver to my name, and I don't even know where that is. But yeah, but I got it propped all the way up against the wall now, so I don't feel so bad.
He was supposed to bring tools to put the headboard on, but he sort of forgot.
That's okay. But yeah, it's nice. The cat, and it's funny because the cat loves it.
Excellent.
The first thing he did the first night when I got home from the con was he crawled up on the bed and plopped right behind my knees and went to sleep.
Well, as long as the cat's happy, you know. That's
yeah, the cat's happy. Mom, on the other hand, is still adjusting.
Well, if we have to come back and put a railing on, let me know.
Yeah, if I keep falling out of the bed, maybe.
Well,
it's really bad.
You were used to a double, and this is a single, so.
Well, yeah, and I literally have to wake myself up completely to roll over because I have the hemiparesis on the right side, so I can't roll like a normal person. I kind of flop and I get stuck halfway between, so I have to wake up. And instead of just rolling like most normal people would, I have to get up, turn myself completely around, and then flop down on that side. It's like a real pain in the butt all over.
Maybe you should put the chair next to it for a few nights and see how that works.
Well, I'm kind of, I was telling you earlier, I'm kind of rearranging. And I have my old computer I'm using as a, quote, entertainment center to watch TV. I don't have TV, so I watch YouTube videos, and I might consider getting Hulu again. And I have the desk up against the wall, but I might actually move it closer to the bed if I keep falling out of it.
But we got to go down to Nashville and have a really good afternoon at NanoCon, hanging out with some people we hadn't seen for a while or ever in some cases, and hearing some interesting speeches and workshops, and got to see Dr. Daryl Ray almost naked in a picture. He put a fig leaf on it, but which he informed me that he only put the fig leaf on because he asked the conference people and they thought it might be a good idea. He doesn't always put the fig leaf on the picture, so
that's
Daryl Ray for you. But he did a really interesting talk about how male shame is the source of female shame and sexuality, which I thought was really interesting. How it's actually the shame of men that they're sort of projecting it onto women.
I've never heard that aspect before. That sounds interesting. Yeah. I've read a couple of his books.
It was an interesting talk for sure. And we got to hang out at the Free Thought Farm, which was pretty awesome. Gail Jordan, who ran for Tennessee Senate and unfortunately lost, but she was quite a fabulous hostess, and her daughter Glenda was amazing, and just all around great time. And of course, the wedding. I mean, who can top that? That was pretty awesome. Callie and Celeste's wedding.
I found it fascinating because, and I said it down there to Callie and Celeste, is that they were the first gay marriage, official gay marriage that I've attended to, including my own 25 years ago.
Yeah, because it wasn't legal.
Yeah, it wasn't legal back then. But I mean, it was neat to see two of the bestest people being able to
totally
tie the knot legally, and
yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, as you said, meeting Gail and her daughter Glenda, that was kind of a high point.
Absolutely. And the wedding was upstaged by a cat, of course. the cutest little black cat. He strutted up onto the patio and stopped in front of Celeste and surveyed the audience and kind of nodded his approval before sauntering away. But
Yes, and we all got the symbolism of it being a black cat.
Yes, it was a black cat. So it had blessed the holy satanic gay trans wedding, you know. It's pretty awesome. We're like, out of all the cats at the farm, that was the one that had to come up and upstage the wedding, you know. But yeah, and there were ducklings and baby chicks to be cuddled, and just all kinds of awesome things at the Free Thought Farm, which I thought was amazing because I had to look up on GPS to make sure we found our way back. It's actually listed on Google as the Free Thought Farm. I'm like, that's pretty damn awesome. It was asking me for reviews. I'm like, I don't think I should send public reviews to somebody's private property, but you know, it was awesome.
Yeah.
But no.
and I think too with Gail's run for Tennessee legislator, I mean, while she may have lost and the campaign against her was atrocious, to say the least, if any of you have followed it, I think she's opened a lot of doors for not just atheists, but those of us that are gay, those that are trans. So, and I think some of what we're seeing of what she was able to open the doors, we're seeing with the Parkland shooting, with the activism of the kids. So I think a lot of doors were opened up by her, and it was amazing to meet her because I've been following her campaign because she, you know, is an out atheist, and when I learned that she was and her daughter were going to be at the convention, I was like, oh, cool.
And then we got to hang out at her place, which was
yes, yeah. and what for me, I think one of the high points was not so much the conference. I mean, the conference was awesome, but I got to talk to Daryl Ray. Now, some people might think, you know, idol worship. While I appreciate his contributions and stuff, he is so flippin' laid back and such a people person. It was just like astounding. And I got to talk to Matt Dillahunty a little bit more. And, you know, it's just neat to be able to meet people that are higher up on the echelon, so to speak,
or visible, more visible.
Yeah, more visible. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. And find out they're human.
Yeah, they're just average folk. And Mandisa Thomas came and hung out with us a bit too, and that was quite wonderful. Just being people with people, you know.
Yeah. And I actually had, like, I had, before we even left, I had someone say, well, concerning Beyond the Trailer Park, well, why don't you do it full time and make money off of it? It's because, one, I don't want to, and two, I like meeting people. Yeah. I like hearing their stories. Karen being one of the, you know, included in that group. I love what she's doing with her books. I think if I were to, quote, monetize it, in a sense, to make a career out of it, I think it would ruin it for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's actually asked me that question before, but I mean, I never even, well, no, for a brief moment, I considering monetizing the channel ages ago before YouTube went all weird and bizarre, but it just, you know, the effort that would have been needed to do it in a proper legal way, I thought was going to take away from what we were doing.
Well, from the enjoyment of it. And that's what I said to my friend. I said, how many hours do you think I put into some of the episodes? And she's like, oh, 2 or 3. I'm like, multiply that by a factor of 40.
Yeah.
Like when we interviewed Chris, I put in probably 30 or 40 hours of research.
Mm-hmm. You are a research junkie, but yes, you do a lot of good work.
I mean, I try to stay informed, but it's just like, but it's fun for me in that aspect. But if I had to make a living at what I do,
well, and that's because, like, I hear other people say things like, oh, I have to take care of my Patreon commitments for this week, which, hey, if you can, if that works for you and that doesn't take away from it for you, hey, awesome. But yeah, if I was like, oh, now I have to do that thing for Patreon, and even though I'm really tired and I owe it to my subscribers and yada yada, yeah, I think it would probably take away.
I saved that attitude for work.
Yeah, true.
This is fun.
It is. Now they say if you do something you love, it isn't really work. Well,
true.
Yeah, maybe at some point it'll get to that. I don't know, but I don't care. Like, I have people. I was on a hangout last night, and somebody was in the live stream chat going, "You've only got like 3 views on this thing." I'm like, do we look like we do this for the views? No. Then we don't care. We're, a bunch of people in a hangout talking to each other, exchanging ideas, and we happen to be broadcasting it at the same time.
Yeah. But I think that's one of the things that, I took away from the conference is we all do what we do for individual reasons. And I think one of the, the more is like we always say, the more voices, the better.
Well, and I've been watching, I went to Anthony Magnavosco's workshop on street epistemology, and I've been watching some of his videos, and he's had a few people like, oh, is this your job? Because he goes to a local park, and for those of you who don't know, street epistemology is a way of, I guess he kind of terms it as respectfully challenging people's beliefs, and not necessarily about religion. He says, give me anything that you believe really strongly, and I want to discuss it with you. But he uses sort of a Socratic style questioning in order to challenge those beliefs. And people are like, well, is this your job? And he's like, oh no, this is just my hobby. He's just really passionate about it. And he has gotten people to reconsider why they think things and to rethink why they think things, and in some cases change people's minds. And that's not even his goal, to change anybody's mind. He says his goal is to understand why people believe what they believe. And it's not how could you believe something stupid? It's, okay, that's what you believe. I want to understand the mechanism that got you to that point. And so he's challenging it in a non-confrontational way, I guess. But it was interesting when people are like, what do you mean this is just your hobby? He's like, yeah, this is just what I like to do for fun. And he seems to do it quite regularly because there's a lot of videos on his channel.
Well, I might just add that Peter Boghossian is working on a new book that's a little like street epistemology. He asked me to proof it for him, give him some feedback. And it was really interesting because it was, how do you talk to people without alienating them from the first get-go? And I had been going through this, and I'd read several chapters, and then I went out that Thursday night to a group of us in the neighborhood get together, and somebody said something, and I immediately pounced on them. It was like, why do you believe that? So it does take a lot of work to be able to deal with somebody that way, and to keep your passion and anger, etc., low key.
Sure. Because when I was watching his videos, I a couple of times I actually had to turn it off because I was getting frustrated. I'm like, why are you letting them get away with that?
Well, I know in the crazy,
that's not me. I don't want to say I'm overly confrontational, but I don't like to let things slide. So, but
it's like in the crazy group. For some reason this week I've been like overly obsessed. Sorry, I'm really fumbling for words. With the group, because I've never seen such a congregation of stupid, and I do mean stupid, and I want to say idiotic, but I don't want to sound overly harsh. I don't know if these people are just undereducated trolls or whatever, but it's like I just want to rip their throats out, and it's like it's common sense, but I think maybe I should listen to these two a little more.
Look, so Karen, the crazy group, there's a bunch of Facebook groups that we get added to all the time, and one in particular, it's just, we had one that we called the crazy group, but I was since added to another one that's even worse. So it's like the crazy group, but it's just some of the postings, and I'm not even just the theists, like there's atheists posting ridiculous stuff in there too. So it's that's what she was getting frustrated about, and I've seen a lot lately of just like, why are all atheists so stupid, and why are all atheists ugly, and why are all atheists, gay assholes, and just, post after post after post like that, and it's just like, ugh, whatever. And
yeah, I used to post to about 40 or 50 Facebook groups. I would, do my blog, and then I would get on there and post them. But there was so much negative feedback because I write about women and religion, and and I bagged it. Now I have about 8 kind of more or less women atheist group that I post to, because I felt I had to respond, and it just took so much time. I usually started out with, what would your mother say if she heard you say that?
Oh gosh. See, I would have come up with like a catch-all response, and then just after you pasted your links, come back, an hour later and just post all your canned responses. Or actually, just as likely, I probably would have just got like a picture of somebody flipping the bird and just post that, but no, that's me. But I even got fed up the other night with, there's a woman in the one group. She's an atheist, but all she ever does is bitch about other, what she calls fundy atheists, because she doesn't like the more aggressive style of quote debate or discussion or whatever. And all she, like, that's all I've ever seen her do is bitch about other atheists because she doesn't like how they are. And I finally, like, I've seen her hundreds of times, and I finally was just like, at that moment of like, oh, will you shut the fuck up? And I was like, will you quit your goddamn bitching and like post something that's not a wine fest already?
Well, I was on a group that I'd posted to, and it was No Gods, No Masters, Atheist Feminist or something. And I had done this post with Shanna Babylonia. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's a very good writer. She's not doing a blog anymore, but it was why we need more secular men. It wasn't a topic that I normally would have done, but posted it. And I just got totally attacked. And I said, we wouldn't have gotten the right to vote if men hadn't voted for us to have we worked together. And they said, oh, she's going to go bake them cakes or something. And they kicked me off it. So it can be extreme on both ends.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And it gets so frustrating after a while. It's like, does no one understand what the hell nuance is anymore? Like, at all? Apparently not, but yeah. But we had a good time, and we learned a lot of stuff, and we met a lot of cool people and saw some people we hadn't seen for a while. And Beyond the Trailer Park took over a whole hotel suite, and Morgan and I's guys, the three of us, we sat up talking till like 4 a.m. the night before the conference. Our guys were in the next room like sawing logs, and 3 of us were in the main room just like blah, 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 blah. Oh fuck,
3 women.
Oh shit. And I was gonna stay up, and then I made the unfortunate choice. Well, I really didn't have a choice because I needed a bloody bath, but I went and had a nice hot bath and got out. It was like, oh shit. So I fell asleep for like an hour and a half, but
yeah, and I just laid down to put my feet up, and
but that was the next night. The first night you were up with us talking the whole
well, the first night I wasn't planning on going to bed either. I was just laying down to put my feet up because they swell so bad, and I was like, I was out like a light. But it's like, yeah, it was just like a show. We should have taped it.
Like, we're all in one room. Blah, 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 blah. I felt sorry for the guys because they kind of got abandoned in the other room. But luckily for them, it was a suite. There was a TV in each room, so they could go how they saw fit. But
yeah, the second night y'all had to watch Fox News.
That was Jonathan. That was not us. Morgan's boyfriend, and we tease him. He is a Christian still for now, but he's very much on the same page as us for most things, and he thought he needed to torture us with 5 minutes of Fox News for some reason. Because
I wake up from my snooze, walk in to use the restroom, and there's Fox News on the TV, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, we were all sitting there going, what the fuck is that?
Well, you know, on my iPad, I have all of those apps. And so I'll watch CNN, and then I'll flip to Fox News and Breitbart and RT. And it's just fascinating to trace the same story. Mm-hmm. Fox was talking about the students leaving trash on the marches. That was their focus. That was their headline. Yeah, they left trash. Yep.
It negates everything they said, obviously, because they litter.
Well, and then they had the nerve to talk about the numbers. It's like, weren't you the ones who talked about Trump's numbers and inflated them a little?
A little.
So it was ironic. What can I say?
I had to tell one last little story about the first night before we got to Nashville. After we picked up Beth, we stayed in Akron, Ohio, for the first night before we headed on to Nashville. And that morning, they had a free continental breakfast at the hotel. Worst one ever, because we got down there. There was only us three, and they really didn't have much food. Like, you know, they didn't have, the only thing hot they had was waffles. They didn't even have fruit for my husband. There was like hardly anything. So I was kind of grumbly about that. But then they had Fox and Friends on the fucking television. And I wasn't even down there 5 minutes. Like, I'm waiting for my English muffin to toast, and I'm screaming at the television. It's just ridiculous. And then to top it all off, they had a rack at the back of the room that had like pamphlets and flyers and whatnot, reading material. And prominently featured in the middle of the reading materials rack was 2 issues of Awake from Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh.
So, it's like worst hotel breakfast ever. But anyway, so you, Karen, you have another book coming out. Yay! And it's similar format where you have solicited writings from a number of secular women, but this time it's more got a slightly different theme, and you're talking about women versus religion, which is the main title of the book. So what kind of, like, did you plan to have a theme and work from that, or did it just kind of evolve that way, or what was your goal with that?
Well, the first one was kind of less planned, if you will, but I ended up having 22 women tell their personal stories. So it was their own personal journey away from religion. Yeah. And then as I got more involved in the atheist movement, I went to the Women in Secularism conference and met a lot of people there. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I should do another book. But this one, it's 13 women, and most of them are already writers, you know, Valerie Tirico, Abby Hafer, Candace Gorham, etc. Or they have blogs or something like that. And then we structured it from what are all the ways in which religion subjugates women. And so it focuses on, and we can obviously talk more about this, but shame, guilt. It focuses on issues like African Americans in particular, or Latinas. There's an ex-Muslim who writes, which is unique to this book, and a transgender woman. So one of the things I've been trying to do with this book, because it is a little more academic and well-researched, is to interest women's studies groups in it. What? And yeah, it's going to be real interesting, because I don't know how you can study gender women's studies without studying religion. You know, it's a history of it. How can you, it's such an important institution in society for the last, you know, several millennia. How can you not? And, you know, the responses have been really, really minimal. Now, I appreciate that academics get a lot of email, and I've got a campaign. I'm going to do it over and over again until, you know, I totally piss everyone off. But I've gotten a couple of people who are reading the book, and I just think that that would be such a strong component to look at when you're doing a women's studies program. Look at the biggest factor that subjugates women, which is religion. How can you not do that?
Well, I think Candace Gorman's first essay in your book basically exemplifies the whole point. I mean, shame, guilt, and anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, and its relationship to mental health issues, which for me, I mean, why her essay caught my eye is I have bipolar disorder, and I was raised in a my parents don't believe in mental health issues. It's all spiritual. My college was a Christian college. It was the same way. Your mental health issues were you weren't the right kind of Christian. You weren't praying enough. And, you know, granted, I mean, I was a cutter. So I had, you know, other issues melded into the bipolar. But it wasn't until I completely dumped religion that I actually had improvement in my mental health. Now, whether that's coincidence.
Oh, not at all.
I personally, I don't think it is, because I've talked to other people that, you know, when they dumped religion or, you know, lessened it to the degree that they were much more comfortable, they improved in their mental health, the shaming, the guilt, I mean, everything surrounding it. And I think her essay kind of encapsulates the whole essence of your book. Because, I mean, the guilt that I felt because, oh, you're not the right kind of Christian. You're not praying enough. You don't pray to the right God, or God forbid if you were Catholic. And, you know, I mean, even though, you know, Catholics did go to my school, I don't know how many times I heard people say, well, you don't pray to the right people because, you know, they have the thing to Mary, Mother of Jesus. And he's like, how insane is that to tell people you know, guilt them? Oh, you don't pray to the right people. It's like, even today I saw it in the crazy group, of course. They're like, great conversation. Then so, well, you're Catholic, so what you say doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, we had, I was called to jury duty in Oregon, and there is a sect that doesn't believe in seeking medical help from professionals. Mm-hmm. And this couple had a baby in their house, and the baby died. And I thought it was kind of interesting because they had us fill out this 5-page questionnaire. And of course, I wrote I was an atheist. I thought I'd get kicked out right away, but I made it to voir dire, which is where the attorneys from both sides examine you. I didn't make it past that, but they were convicted unanimously by the jury, and both ended up serving prison terms. And can you imagine feeling like that child died? It's my fault the child died. It's my fault. I didn't pray enough. I didn't do the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, I get angry with those scenarios and people who do that. But on the flip side, you know, you're right. They're sitting there punishing the hell out of themselves. I mean, rightly so in some ways, but that they thought that they were actually doing what they were supposed to do, and it's some inadequacy of theirs that it didn't work, which is just ridiculous. It's no, because you bought the idea that you didn't need to go to a doctor that this happened. So, you know,
based on religion.
Yes. It's like you've made yourself responsible, but that wasn't how you're actually responsible, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. And when I was in graduate school, I went out with a guy who was raised as a Christian Scientist. And he said, you have no idea what it's like that every time you get sick, it's your fault.
Yep.
So
and to live with that. And that, you know, I think Candace does a really good job of this, and Alexis Record too, and are talking about indoctrinating children. When we learn something as children, and you know, our parents are who we depend on, and when they tell us something, we believe it. And when you're young, it's, you know, you're literally indoctrinated. And I think the one thing I always say, that I was raised in kind of a namby-pamby Lutheran church, but the whole idea of sex, you know, you were supposed to be a virgin when you were married. And the guilt and shame that goes with that, I think it's one of the most pervasive things that affects women, is the shame of your body. You shouldn't have sex. You're just there for your husband. All of those things, they get ingrained, and it's hard to even unpack those and examine those to let go of them.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I'm so happy I got out as young as I did, because I never got wrapped up into that mindset, thankfully. In fact, that's one thing, and I don't even know where I got the correct idea, but I mean, you know, I was molested as a kid, and I never once ever did I think that was my fault.
Oh, good.
And I don't know how I got that. I'm all fuzzy here. I don't know how I got that lucky, or where that idea came from to me. It was just, I always knew that. I just always did. And I feel so lucky that I do, because so many people get that ingrained in themselves that, well, if something bad happens to me, it's my fault.
It's something you did. Well, and I think you and I joke about it on the show, because I think how we view sex and sexuality, and how it's ingrained into us, and how as women, and dealing with religion and leaving religion, even what we're taught as children still has lasting effects. And I'm a perfect example of it. I mean, I still have some very Victorian views of sex, and I joke about it because I find, because even today at almost 54, I'm still learning. And while, like, I can't see myself going to a Daryl Ray lecture or even understanding what he's saying, I find what he talks about interesting. And Deb and I joke about this, because we, you know, even just when we talk in general, I'll, you know, between, you know, when we have photos, sometimes we'll talk, and I'm just like,
she turns all red.
I will turn various shades of red, and that's something that was instilled in me. I mean, my parents' notion of sex education, even though I had it in school, and it was fairly decent, I won't knock that. I mean, but here's
a book.
Yes, here's a book, and Karen, you probably got the same book I did, because I was raised Lutheran.
No, I didn't get a book. I didn't get a book at all. We had no sex education in school. And when I was in 9th grade, a friend of mine got a book, and her mother gave it to her. And I was over at her house one day, and she says, "Karen, I don't understand this word." I said, "Well, let's look it up." It was masturbation.
I don't even think that word was in our book. I know it talked about having our dot all the time, but
well, it was masturbation, and we looked it up in the dictionary, and this was in the early 60s. The definition was so obtuse, we still couldn't figure out what it meant. You know, it's something like self-satisfactory, da-da-da-da-da. And I laughed till this day. I saw her 5 years ago to high school year reunion. I said, "Did you remember that?" But I had nothing. You know what I did? My sister had a book called 79 Park Avenue by Harold Robbins. And I took it and I read it. And the shop owner rapes a young girl. That's how I figured out what intercourse was.
Ooh. My indoctrinate, and this is really bizarre, into sex was, I think I was in college. Okay, I could give two shits about anything dealing with dating or sex. I was too into hockey when I was growing up, and I played hockey straight through college until I retired when I was 22. So I didn't give a shit about any of that crap. Self magazine, that was my education into all things sex.
Now, see, when I was a kid, the doctor's office that we went to had, I think it was like a Reader's Digest book of anatomy. So it was an anatomy book, but it wasn't certainly to the level that an actual medical student would look at. It was more of a layperson's thing. But, you know, here's me flip. Wow, it's a penis, you know, that kind of I don't even know how old I was. I had National Geographics hidden in my
I was going to say, I only got her from National Geographic at the dentist's office.
I had some of those. They were hidden in my closet, but I did get a book. And it was, I don't remember a lot about the book. It was kind of a, you know, this is what sperm and eggs are. Here's where babies come from sort of thing. But yeah, my mother never talked about any of this stuff. We had sex ed. I remember was here's what your vagina is, and here's a uterus, and here's why you have a period, and here's how to use a tampon, and this is what you do if you need pads, and that, you know, it was all about menstruation. It really had nothing to do about sex per se, which I think it was like 6th or 7th grade. I forget what year it was, but I don't know. I think I figured out a lot of it on my own. It just, I don't know. I just seemed to, and maybe I was just reading I did get into trouble for taking books out of the library that were above my reading level, supposedly. Maybe that's what I was trying to do. I don't remember, but
I mean, that's a perfect example of what the I'll use stories just because I can't think of the right word, that your book espouses and shows that the type of control that's religion puts over women. And I think, you know, having the women that the writers that you have in your book are so powerful because they blast through all that shit.
Well, yeah, and they unpack it. I'll have to, one of the Dr. Abby Hafer, who wrote The Not So Intelligent Designer. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a really cool book. And she and Valerie Treaker and I were on a podcast, and she was talking. She does this cute story in her essay about, okay, the first sex was Eve. Sorry. You know, Eve, single cell, begets Eve, begets Eve. That's how it goes. And then somebody, of course, got on a comments and saying, well, you shouldn't make the first sex female, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but it was funny. And then she talks about, you know, what develops in terms of evolution and survival is this mixing of genes. And that's where sex came in. And obviously was quite a bit later. But she talked about this cell, and I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but it's eukaryotic or eukaryotic cell.
Eukaryote.
Eukaryote, yeah.
Eukaryote, thank you. That has 7 genders, if we want to call it, or sexes, whatever. And so that gender 1 can mate with all the 6 other ones, right? And basically, that one has an opportunity to mate with 85% of the population versus when there are only 2 sexes and you mate with, you know, you have an opportunity to mate with 50%. And I just thought that was fascinating. How, you know, when you look at evolution and where we got to be the way we are, and why did this go forward and that not go forward? You know, it's kind of like the bonobos. They, you know, they have sex all the time and they don't have a lot of aggression. So it's been a way for them to deal with aggression. And of course, we're from chimpanzees, which are more, you know, there's a male, et cetera, and keeps the females. And I keep thinking, gee, what if we would have developed from bonobos? That might have been a lot more fun.
Really good observation that they don't have as much aggression and they're having sex all the time. I think that's very salient.
Well, and then she talks about in the essay about, you know, they want to talk about the intelligent designer, and she's putting down the intelligent designer, and she talks about women's bodies. Because we started to walk upright, one of the things about walking upright is you need a narrow pelvis. Don't ask me why, but you do. And as we developed, you know, from Australopithecus, et cetera, onward, we got a bigger brain. And so now we're in the situation where we've got a bigger brain fetus coming out of a narrower pelvis. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, as opposed to a giraffe, it, you know, comes out and starts walking right away. We take so much time nurturing a child for, you know, many years because of that, because they're almost like born too early, if you will. And she suggests that if we would have developed from kangaroos, it'd have been much cooler, because then it just comes up in the pouch, nurse is there, no pain delivery. So that was another option that obviously didn't work out.
That's too bad. It would have been, marsupials would have been much more entertaining, I think.
Yeah.
I might have actually considered having a kid if I was going to do it that way.
Oh, fuck no.
And I'll tell you, it hurts. I remember delivering our son, and my husband's kind of saying, well, let's keep breathing. You just keep trying the breathing. And I'm going, I'm getting a shot. I'm getting an epidural. You can go breathe in the corner if you want to, but give me one now. If I'd had 2 children, I would have probably tried to get one before I went to the hospital, you know, because it is painful. It is painful.
More credit to you, because I mean,
you're talking to 2 child-free chicks here, so more power.
Well, you know, I had an interesting talk with somebody the other day. People like to say, oh, you know, biology determines who women are, biology determines who men are, and we're naturally supposed to feel good about having children and nurturing, et cetera. Well, most of that is learned. I mean, I bought a book, 12 months, and I read the month 1. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? But somebody who'd read my book, and actually who lives in Silverton, Oregon, which is surprising because it's a very small town. And she said she was married and she had a baby and she couldn't bond to it. Yeah. She absolutely couldn't bond. It was like, I can't do this. And the couple ended up giving the child for adoption. So it's not something necessarily that everyone should be doing.
Well, I just saw a headline the other day about it. I didn't read the article, but the headline, which I know are, you know, supposed to be catchy anyways, basically came out saying, oh, you know, she gave birth and regretted it because, as you said, she never was able to bond with the child.
And I, like a lot of people say, you know, oh, women all love babies. No, I don't love babies. Like, my nieces have lots of kids, and my cousins have lots of kids, and like I have 5 or 4 great nephews and a great niece, and I'll be at my mom's and they'll, you know, oh, do you want to hold the baby? I'm like, no, it's fine. It's a baby. That's great. You know, come back to me when she's like, you know, 6 and can talk to me. Kind of
well,
thing.
I always tell our son I was a good part-time mom. Because I worked, you know, I took off 2 months. My husband took off a month, which was very impressive. Yeah. And I don't think I could have been a full-time mom. I mean, if people can do that, that's great. And if that's what they want to do, it's absolutely their choice. And it's a great thing to do. But it was probably because, I mean, I was 40 when I had him. So I had a career and, you know, had been doing that for quite a while. But it's something you learn, and some people want to do it and some people don't. And it's a good thing we have birth control, because in the past, I remember growing up in North Dakota, and there was a farm family that had 16 kids.
Oh,
well, you had no choice. You just had them.
Well, at case in point, and I always laugh about this because Canadian, we have coming up in May is Queen Victoria's birthday, Victoria Day. We still celebrate that as a national holiday. And I always like to point out that Queen Victoria was very sexual, just loved having sex with Prince Albert, but she did not like kids. But she had 9 children because she really liked sex with Prince Albert. And that's just how it happened in, you know, 1840. You know, you like sex, you're probably going to end up with a child or 2 if you're fertile.
Oh, I read a book about a couple in Minnesota. It was probably 19th century. And she'd had a child, and the doctor said, you can't have any more children. you know, and so there weren't any medical procedures available at the time, no birth control. And her husband and wanted to continue to have sex. So they had sex, she got pregnant and died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very, very sad story, because there, you know, there weren't any alternatives. I mean, she could have never had sex again, but that wasn't going to happen in that particular
that's part of the problem with the Quiverful movement is the woman's health be damned. I mean, there are numerous cases of women who risked their, well, Michelle Duggar's perfect example. Josie was born premature. Now, whether Michelle, you know, her health, whether it was, you know,
a factor,
facing death, don't remember, but she could have died. If I remember correctly, Vicky Garrison was faced with that same dilemma. I mean, and there's stories and stories. Like one of the discussions I had today was that there's 18 million children that are in orphanages or foster worldwide.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sorry, my choice to not have a child, you know, regardless of the statistics, is based on the fact that I was born into that system. I'm adopted. I was adopted at birth, so I never faced foster care. But I wouldn't want to bring a child into the world. I mean, one, I financially cannot afford it. I mean, you're talking almost $1 million between birth and 18 years old, including college. I can't afford that. I haven't even made $1 million, I don't think, in my lifetime.
Well, and I think it's real interesting. I've been reading about early societies, hunter-gatherer societies, Paleolithic, et cetera, and the anthropologists who study those say that in some of those, they're, especially when they're a little more egalitarian, that they keep that child nursing for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And that somewhat protects you from getting pregnant again. It's not a shoo-in. But when agriculture developed and private property, and I kind of think it was all downhill after private property, but you know, you're doing this farm and the farm is getting bigger and you need people to work it and you want them to be your kids. So the woman has to be a virgin, she can't commit adultery, and you want her to have lots of kids. And, you know, I heard somebody say the other day, well, why didn't women rebel earlier? Well, excuse me, if you're having a kid every other year, that's all you're doing. And you're taking care of them. And then you're still doing the gathering and the planting and all the things with no modern conveniences. How are you going to join with other women to upset the patriarchy? Come on.
Exactly. And not to mention that you know, most of them are going to actually care for their children and want to rear them and spend that time with them. And oftentimes, and actually I see this a lot in religiously based patriarchal family structures, is this notion of, you know, having a kid early. Half of that is let's get the woman busy with kids so she doesn't have time to realize what kind of situation she's in, right? Like, get her pregnant fast, and she's busy, and she's got a kid. So even if she did decide that she didn't want to be in that marriage, well, she's got a kid now, and how's that going to work? And I think that's part of it, whether it's a conscious thing in some situations or not a conscious thing. I think that plays a big role in it.
And I think the two of the authors who are Hispanic, Hypatia Alexandria and Marilyn DeLasia, talk about that, about how, you know, raised Catholic, the church's influence, as well as cultural issues, they're encouraged to marry really early on and to have a kid right away. And so that woman trying to, like, what's my personal goal? What do I want to do in life? Doesn't have a chance to explore any of that. She's just married off early and starts having kids, and they believe in having a lot of kids because the Catholic Church tells them to, and they're not supposed to have birth control. So their whole life, whatever they wanted to do is totally taken away.
Absolutely.
I think, and this was the point I think we brought up the last time we had you on in regards is the whole notion of with the development of especially Judeo-Christian religions and Abrahamic religions is the loss of the notion of divine feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. I've done a lot of work on that. Yeah.
And I haven't touched it since the last time you were on because, of course, I get sidetracked. But it's like, I thought it was funny because as I was, and I will admit I did not read your entire book. I totally forgot you were coming today.
It's still there for you. It's still there for you, Beth. It's okay.
Yeah, but I skimmed through quite pretty quickly, and that whole notion of the divine feminine was, again, which I don't find a problem with.
It's
a thread throughout
both
your books, and I, as I haven't touched the topic in probably a year, I just find that so fascinating because it's something I think we've lost, not just in religion, but in society as a whole. And you can say maybe we're getting some of it back when we got the right to vote, but I just find that interesting that theme is still there.
Well, and a couple of these essays, both the woman who's the ex-Muslim and one of the African-American women who talks about, prior to the Jim Crow laws, and then the second African-American talks about afterwards. And she talks about African goddesses.
Yeah.
They were African goddesses. They were African queens. There were African women who owned businesses. So those women who came over as slaves lost doubly. So they lost their autonomy as a person, and they also lost any notion of a feminine divine. And I think for people who have that Bible sitting in front of them, read it. Read it, because you've got that tension going on between trying to get rid of the people worshiping Asherah, which was one of the female goddesses in Canaan. And the women don't want to give it up. When we worship the Queen of Heaven, they say in Jeremiah, everything was great. We're going to go back to do it. But we've lost a lot with that. Deborah, you were saying something.
Oh, no, I was sort of off track. I was thinking of, too, when you look at, they're not really goddesses, but sort of ancient, famous African women like Nefertiti and Cleopatra and women like that. What ends up happening? They're just turned into sex objects. Right? What does anybody know about Nefertiti? Oh, she was beautiful. What does anybody know about Cleopatra? Well, she was beautiful and she slept around with Caesar and Antony, right? But then there's women like Hatshepsut, who I absolutely adore, who the hell's that? Because she took her femininity and turned it into, I'm a pharaoh and you're going to follow me. and took that role and owned it as a woman, even though it kind of sucks that she had to dress as a man to do it. But still, I mean,
well, and if you look at Islam, they like to say that, women were totally oppressed before Muhammad came along, and it was so much better for them under Islam. And the opposite was true. In fact, Muhammad's wife was a big caravan businesswoman.
Yep.
And there was a woman who was a, warrior who fought against Muhammad. So they basically destroyed all that history and kind of washed it over. And then Muhammad adopted all of these things that were inherent in the Judeo-Christian religion, whether it's you're dirty, you're unclean. And I can't help thinking, I may have mentioned this the last time I was on, but, think of the Paleolithic people, seeing all the cycles in the earth, and seeing how things, came back again. And one of the symbols of the goddess is a snake, because she regenerates herself. And they see that they go out and hunt and get cut they bleed and they die. And yet they come back to the cave and the woman has a period and she doesn't die. And it's totally in cycle with the moon. I mean, that had to be kind of like, wow, that's it's a pretty big deal. And then when she has a baby, they thought for literally centuries that it was the blood that formed the baby because she quit menstruating.
Oh, and that's it. Because the Quran says, I mean, now, quote, Allah can't make up his mind where people came from, but one of the things is a blood clot.
Well, they didn't know about the egg until the 17th or 18th century.
Exactly.
I think it's pretty clear when patriarchy started, and I would say that was with agriculture, private property, etc. They had figured out the male role. And I even read once that in some of the Paleolithic, they think they didn't even, that you hunt when the animal comes back. And some had this notion that they died and they were regenerated and they came back the next year. I mean, they didn't see them all year. But when they started hurting the animals, then they, made the connection of what was happening with the animals. That must be them. And took over this, I'm the one that has the child. I'm the one that forms the child. And like I said, it wasn't until millennia later that they figured out, well, actually, there's an egg there.
Yeah. Takes two.
Takes two.
But
exactly.
the Quran in several places said that, Allah formed you from a blood clot. So in that context, I'm like, bing, oh, that makes more sense now.
Yeah, they believe that the menstrual blood created the child. And that lasted a very, very, very long time. That's where the blood clot came from.
Absolutely. Now, later on, he's like, oh, I made you from clay. I made you from what? Like I said, Allah is very confused. He changes about shit all the time.
Yeah, you're copying the Old Testament and you go, well, I should change a little here.
Well, I'm reading the Quran. I actually, you probably don't know, I started a new show where I'm reading the Quran. So
wow. I have one and I haven't read it. I will confess I haven't read it yet.
I hope it's not the Pickthall translation.
Is that a bad one?
Well, actually, in terms of acceptability, it's the best one, which is why I chose it. But this is a guy, Pickthall translated it in the 1920s. He decided it had to sound like the King James fucking Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
hard to read. Well, Hiba Cha, who wrote the essay about Islam, I did all the reference checks. When I got to her, there's the Sharia law, there's Hadith, there's the Quran, and man, it was like I really had to work hard on checking all those out to be sure all the footnotes were double checked. It's complicated. It's complicated.
It definitely is. But the next time I get into it with a Muslim and they're going on about blood clots, I'd be like, oh, well, did you know where that came from?
Well, and that's what I found fascinating too with your book is it's much more multicultural because you have not just Judeo-Christian, you have Judaism included, but you have ex-Muslim, you have a woman who was raised in India, although to Christian parents.
That was a cool read.
And I just found that fascinating because, and white privilege, you never think that way, even though I, like for myself personally, I have many friends that fall into all those groups, but I never really thought about the multicultural aspect of patriarchy. Yes. It's not just the U.S.
because we get
North America.
We get the biblical flavor of it. But what I found fascinating about reading, and I'm kicking myself because I saw Aruna was at Imagine a Religion last summer, and I missed her talk because I had a dizzy spell come on and I had to go lay down. And but her essay was fascinating because she's got that Christianity women are inferior bit. And then on top of the Indian culture, which is so patriarchal, and I've always been kind of confused about why Indian culture is so patriarchal, because if you look at the basics of Hinduism, there are so many strong female characters in the Hindu pantheon. I've always
if you look at Roman and Greek civilization, it's the same. I mean, they had pantheons, they had god and goddesses, but if you take Greek culture, the woman was supposed to stay in the house. They were not in the public area, and homosexuality was okay because the boys were smart, right?
Right.
So I'm going to talk to them, so I'll have sex with them, and she's back there taking care of the kids. So I think that's part of the explanation. You can even have goddesses along with male gods and still be in a patriarchal society.
I just thought it was strange because one of my favorite goddesses for symbolism is Kali Ma. I mean, I have a huge Kali.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I've always loved the story around her, how, the main story of her taking on the demon that none of the other gods and goddesses could kill. And she was the only one that figured out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was so amazing. And she's so strong, and when she gets enraged, she would just destroy the world, and somebody has to restrain her because her passion just overwhelms herself and all of that. And then you look at a deity that represents those things, and then you look at such a patriarchal culture where women, like in Aruna, talking about how her and her sisters were just basically useless, and why do we have you? Like, why couldn't you have been a boy? And it doesn't compute to me.
Well, and isn't it interesting in that essay she writes about her mother-in-law? I mean, about the mother-in-law, her grandmother, that absolutely, it's like you're worth nothing. You're just a girl. And here's a woman saying that. But I think it's back to that indoctrination. You get caught up in the whole thing. You get indoctrinated to feel you're not worth something. And she's thinking of her son and wants her son to have a son. So everything goes on. But the thing about Aruna's essay is the most tragic is here she sees a teenage girl next door being set on fire, immolated, killed. No police, no anything. She dishonored the family. That's totally fine. Kill her. How do you live with that? I mean, how do you come up with any sense of self-worth when you see that?
We had a situation here. Oh gosh, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but I think it's going on like 5 years ago or so now. But it was a family called the Shafia family in Ontario, where I live. The husband, he actually had 2 wives, although only one was a legal wife, and 3 daughters and a son, of course. And he and his second wife, who was the mother of the daughters, actually killed all 4 of the other women. Killed his first wife and his 3 daughters because they were, quote, too westernized. So his wife and his son and himself killed all those 4 women.
Well, and it's happening now. It's not happening 500 years ago. It's happening now. There was someone in California who ran over his daughter, killed his daughter with a car because she had dishonored the family by going out with a boy or something like that. I mean, it's happening today. Now, do you know Greta Vosper?
We've had her on the show.
Oh, good. So
Greta's local to me as well.
Yeah. So it's I thought her story was very interesting, to be able to stay in a congregation, admit you're an atheist. I can't do the doctrine. I understand if you leave. If you want to stay, that's fine. And totally transforming this church. And now coming under fire by the United Church of Christ Canada, I think.
United Canada.
United Church of Canada. Do you know the latest on that?
Yes. Last I heard, she was supposed to go and have her tribunal or whatever in November, and it was indefinitely postponed.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Okay. I knew that it was scheduled way far in advance, but they actually canceled it. So she's going to be okay.
Well, postponed. So what they're saying is we are going to revisit this. We just don't know when exactly. So I think they might be trying to save face. Now, that's the church I was raised in, actually. So, I find it rather fascinating because honestly, I agree with Greta. It's probably the most progressive Christian church on the planet. Like they've had women pastors since the 1930s. They were the first ones to embrace gay clergy. They were the first to embrace gay marriage, all of that stuff. But still, they're stuck in this crap, and it's mind-boggling. But I really admire that too, because I don't know how I could do that. I wouldn't.
Now, do you have anything in Canada like Sunday Assembly?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. I was at a celebration of life for a friend of mine, and there was somebody from the Sunday Assembly who talked. And I think what's interesting about that is people are used to the community the churches have. They like the ritual. They like the music. And it gives them an opportunity to get together and have those friends and have that community on the Sunday. But obviously, it's all secular.
Greta's been actually instrumental in something called Oasis, which is it's very similar to Sunday Assembly, and she's been instrumental in getting that going in various communities close to Toronto. So that's a thing. And I believe we do have some Sunday Assembly in Canada as well.
You're just so much more progressive than we are. What happened? I mean, what happened? Because, Canada, wasn't it settled by Catholics and French and that kind of stuff? And what happened?
Because they were French Catholics, but they were business people first. We were founded by the Hudson's Bay Company. We were founded as business. So you guys were founded by religious zealots. So, yeah.
Well, I think going back to Greta, what makes her story so, I won't say maybe unique, is that her congregation supports her, at least a good majority of it. And the fact that we're just, now getting the Sunday Assembly going, so to speak, here in the U.S., while for me personally, it would not be a thing, I can understand where people need, that, semblance of community, because like the first thing to go when I came out as atheist, it was the fact that pretty much everybody I knew went bye-bye. They were like, see you, bye. I mean, and I find it funny now because, doing what I do with Beyond the Trailer Park and my blog and my various postings is a lot of my friends from high school, so we're going back 30 years, are now friending me on Facebook, which I find really bizarre because it's like, okay, you kind of ditched me 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden, so it's like I think there's into to foster that and to get out. And I think especially for women, the church community, whether it, is kind of an important social aspect. And I think I can see where the Sunday Assembly falls into that, because
I would really like to survey the people who are coming to our 50th high school year reunion. Graduated in 1968, Bismarck, North Dakota. Everyone I knew went to church. There were 5 Jewish families. There was a Catholic church, and the rest were Protestant and almost all Lutheran, because German, Norwegian settled it. And I would love to do a survey, and I might do that, of people who are going and saying, were you raised in a church? What do you do now? you know, when did you get married? Did you stay in North Dakota? Just kind of get a feeling collectively of that group of people and who's changed, who hasn't, and in what ways. I just think that would be fascinating to look at. I mean, there were 450 people in my graduating class, so it's a, you know, it's a good group of people, and some of them have passed away, but I might have to get the emails and do something like that.
Well, I know quite a few in my high school graduating class are atheists. In fact, a couple of my teachers who I am connected to on Facebook are atheists. It is not something we done. I graduated about 15 years after you. It was not something that was discussed back then. So I find it fascinating that I'm reconnecting with these people based on my atheism.
Yeah. Well, I always put my blog posts on my Facebook page so everyone knows about that. So, but you know, even when I went to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, there back in 1968, our first religion, I can do it in a heartbeat. Yeah, sure, you betcha. Our first religion class, Religion 101, talked about all the different oral strains of the Old Testament. You know, they understood linguistically, religious scholars of, you know, J stood for Yahweh, that was the first. And then there was P, priestly, which was the last. And, you know, they were talking about that openly, that this was a document that had been written and edited over time in a religious institution. And you would think, you know, 50 years ago, we might have progressed a little further today based on that at a religious college, but alas, not so much.
Well, it's funny because when I went to a Christian college, my original major was Bible and theology. And what we were taught was that, well, I don't say we were taught, but it was an assumption, is that, yeah, theologians know all this stuff, but what's taught from the pulpit, what's preached from the pulpit is the exact opposite.
Yeah. And I felt when I went to grad school in Madison, Wisconsin, you know, far away from where I lived, I couldn't go to church because church for me was everybody I knew. I knew everybody in the pews. I knew who the parents to the kids were, etc. And I was shy. And I'd walk into a church and it's like, this isn't church. I don't know anybody here. You know, so it was a long time before I ever went to a church again. I just felt alienated.
Yeah.
Well, I have 68 sets of parents.
What does that mean?
Church I grew up with, I had 68 parents.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I knew everybody knew me whether I wanted to or not. But the nice thing about that, if I got stranded somewhere and needed a ride and my parents weren't around, I could call anyone.
Exactly. Well, and I hope the Sunday Assembly and what Greta's doing can recreate that sense of community. Now, for me, I join groups that are political, whether it's women's rights or progressive politics. And I mean, we moved to this small town in Oregon, and there's a group called Silverton Progressives. And I'm on a group working for fossil-free Silverton City. So those are the kind of things I joined to get that sense of community. So I think there's other opportunities out there, but I'm glad there are things like Oasis and Sunday Assembly and Greta, so people cannot feel so alienated when they leave. We have to make it easier for people to leave. And, you know, we have to focus on women. I tell you, I look at, you can go to Amazon and ask for the 100 top books on atheism. And every time I do that, 5 or 6 are written by women.
Yeah. You
know, there just aren't books out there written by women, and who should really be fighting religion more than women do? And, you know, I kind of feel I've done my part. I've done my 2 books. I might at 68, when I turn 68 in June, retire again. I don't know. But it just feels that we need to have more women speaking out. And, you know, there's all this hullabaloo about what's happening in the atheist community lately and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, which happens in every organization. But we need women to be there. Speak out. Be strong.
Yeah, I think the key word is speak. And you look at, and I know I refer back to them over and over again, but Marissa, Kelly, Celeste to some degree. Well, Deb and I, obviously. I mean, we too don't shut up. But you have the younger generation like Amanda Scott, Claire Brake. You got our own Morgan.
Well, Gail and Glenda.
Gail and we're all different ages, all different generations. Deb's Canadian, but her voice, even here in America, at least in my opinion, is still important because she's an outsider looking in and can see where we may be making missteps or don't make any sense. And what am I hearing?
I don't know.
That was my phone that I shut off that makes a noise anyway.
Okay. I thought I was like, here. I was like, okay, I just got a new system, so I'm still learning.
No, I'll tell him.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But yeah, my son, I'll tell him that I'm on a podcast, you know.
Well, we only got about a half hour to go, but
holy shit.
And to go back to what you're saying about the controversy and whatnot, you're speaking at MythCon this year.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about that?
Oh please, because
okay. Well, last year,
yeah,
last year I had been on MythCon on their podcast, and I'd also done my From Goddess to God. And Beth, if you want to see that, it's on YouTube. Just if you just Google Faithless Feminist, you'll find my YouTube channel. And I don't put a lot up there, but I do have that. I do that as a presentation on book tours, and it traces that whole thing from the Paleo first. You might be interested in that. There's actually a bibliography at the end, books that you might be interested in. But anyway, they asked me to promote the conference last year, and I thought, well, gee, these guys are great. I met them at Reason Rally. I'm going to do that, and I gave away some free tickets, and I think I got free admission for me and a friend, and I have a really, really good friend from grad school who lives in Oshkosh. So yeah, she came down. We had a wonderful time. Well, and then all of this stuff comes up with Dan Arrow and Christy Winters and other friends of mine who said, oh, don't go. This is terrible. Sargon of Akkad's going to be on there. And I thought, well, no, I'm going to go see my friend Jean in Wisconsin. I'm going to go. And I went. And some of them, Melissa Chan did a really nice presentation, I thought, on the Enlightenment. And there was a Batman and Jesus movie that was previewed. Yeah. And so there were very interesting things. And then Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, was paired with Thomas Smith. And I think what happened was it was supposed to be Thomas Smith and David Rubin. And David Rubin pulled out. So I think Thomas kind of got stuck in this position with Sargon, and he didn't really know it beforehand, and he stayed there, which I really admire him for. But here you got these two guys discussing feminism. And so I was like in the fourth row. So I got up to ask the first question, and I said, I'm the Faithless Feminist. My goal is to get women to leave religion. I think it totally subjugates women. But I don't think we're going to get there if we have two men debate feminism. Like, hello? Yeah. I mean, two men. So Sean Frazier called me a few months ago and said, would you be willing to be a debate about feminism? And I kind of felt like I'd be a hypocrite if I said no. So I said yes. And I kind of had a feeling of who I was going to end up debating. And it turned out to be right. And it was Karen Strawn, who's a woman who's a men's rights activist.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah. But, it's fascinating because as I kind of feel I was active in the 60s and 70s in the feminist movement. And right. Then, I moved out here to Oregon. I had jobs. I got involved with political groups. And we had Oregon Women's Political Caucus. And then a few years later, we have this thing called WinPAC, which is Women's Investment Network, which supports pro-choice Democratic women. They have to be Democrat and pro-choice. And those are the things I focused on. I didn't focus on what was happening nationally with third wave feminism and all of that kind of stuff. And when I started my blog, my marketing guy suggested Godless Grandmother for a title. And I said, could we not emphasize that I'm a grandmother, please? know I'm old, but let's not say the old fart blog. So he came up with Faithless Feminist. And I thought, well, that's cool. That rhymes. It's good, you know. And then I discovered all this stuff about, you know, Alice Walker's daughter and third wave feminism and this radical this. And I learned all these new words like trigger warnings and safe spaces and everything. So one of the things that I'm doing to prepare for this is reading a lot of the stuff I never read. And it's fascinating to me. And anytime I can get involved in something that I learn something new, it's great. So, you know, if I had it to do all over again and I saw how it was going to come out, I probably would have said no. But once I make a commitment, I always follow through. So I said yes, so I'm doing it because that's who I am.
I think you made a good point, though. And Deb and I have talked about this in private. I myself a quote feminist, and to clarify, what would now be considered, I guess, a third wave feminist. I'm from the 70s. Okay, I grew up in the 70s and early 80s, so I'm more of the ERA type, more egalitarian, as Deb likes to use. And I find it fascinating because one of the conversations we had over last weekend, and I thank Morgan for this, is that we discussed issues surrounding what's been going on. And I have to admit, and I give you a lot of credit, I'm still fucking confused. I've read more stuff, and I guess because I'm older, it's like I just am really confused by it. I mean, I'm trying, but it's like I have to give you credit for literally sticking your neck out for it.
And what I loved, because we got to meet at MythCon last year, which was great. And what I noticed was when what we not so affectionately call the shit show was
I was going to say that, but go ahead.
So, you can say that on this show. That's totally fine. You were out in the stands trying to have rational discussions with what they would consider neckbeards or whatever, these Sargon fans. You were out there trying to have rational discussions with guys when, they were sitting there basically groupthink cheering everything he said. And I thought that was admirable to at least give it a try.
Well, thank you. And who do you want to speak to? Do you want to speak to the people who agree with you? Or you want to speak to the people who disagree with you?
Yes.
It's a better audience to speak to somebody who disagrees with you. And I'm not a street epistemologist. I couldn't quite confront people like that. I can't, maybe I could go to New York and do it, but I sure wouldn't do it in my hometown. No. But
it's like this shirt I'm wearing. I definitely would not. Well, you can't read it now because the ink got really washed up. It says "Gay the Prey Away."
Yeah.
It's like, but I wouldn't dare walk out of my apartment with this shirt on. I did, though, yesterday. I took it downstairs to work, but that's as far as it got out of my apartment.
Yeah. So I think here's going to be a group of people. If it was anything like last year, there were a lot of white men there.
Yes.
And they were obviously feeling disenfranchised, left behind. And what a better group to talk to. And as a little older woman, I'm probably less intimidating, than a young woman. And I just engaging in the conversation. I think it's really important. If I had said no, I would be going against everything I said in that comment.
Mm-hmm.
And if I criticize two men discussing feminism and think there should be women, yet I as a woman am not willing to be that person, I can't do it. Now, I've had some pushback. I had one of my subscribers said, "Oh, don't go." And I said, "Here's why I'm going. I think it's important." And it's kind of like if somebody invited me to some religious whatever and wanted to debate me, I would be happy to do it. That's where it's at.
It does make sense. And that was one of the things, like, I respect everybody last year who said, you know what, I personally can't be involved in this, and who decided not to go. I don't think that's necessarily anything wrong with that decision. But on the flip side, what I saw as one of the consequences of that decision made by many people was that we were left with a room full of people who mainly thought the same way. There was very little or very few people there to give any alternative viewpoints. And as I say, I don't fault the people who felt that they ethically could not
absolutely
at all. But on the flip side, that was sort of the consequence of that. So that's a hard thing, you know, when you, on one hand, you're saying, I personally ethically can have nothing to do with this. But then what does that do? So,
well, and you know, you were talking about Patreon and getting, you know, going commercial and all that. It does have its downsides.
Absolutely.
I never did this for the money. I've paid a lot of money to edit my 2 books. I'm sure I will never make it back. But it was something I was committed to do. And I have a Patreon account. I think I have 3 Patreons. And I just put this new thing on called Ko-fi, which is buy somebody a coffee, and it's like $5 or something like that. But anyway, I'm not in it for the money, and I don't have any compunction against doing anything I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't have anything drawing me back. I will make a decision for me, and that's all I have to do. So I have a lot more freedom than a lot of people do. I mean, you get 300,000 subscribers, you need to start worrying about your base, you know, and if you're making a living at that, just like if you had a job, you got to be careful about it. Well, I'm retired. I don't have a job. I can do what I want to do. And it gives me a lot more freedom than a lot of people, but I'm looking forward to it because I've been reading and learning, and I do think she makes some good points. I mean, it is true that the society we have treats women differently than men in child custody issues.
Absolutely.
Up until recently, men have gone to war. You know, there haven't been women combat. And so we look at those different things, and I can say, yeah, but why? And how do we get there? And how do we change it? So I'm looking. Plus, Jean's coming down from Oshkosh, so it's going to be a great weekend.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Well, I think you made a good point. Is the fact is that you're on your own, so to speak.
Yes.
Learning the other side, or hopefully learning the other side, and you know, there's going to be biases, of course. But not only that, you're going to have a chance to discuss those differences that we may have with the other side. And, you know, it's one of the criticisms, one of the few criticisms I get is that people tell me, oh, you don't read the other side. It's like, you haven't seen my news feed. And for me personally, not just regarding the feminism issue, but it just in politics, what I see from that side dealing with politics is, to me, it's a bunch of twats. It's just, it's terrible. I mean, it only, you know, in my opinion, supports the elite, where, you know, getting something more nuanced, such as the whole feminist issue, you know, it's like you said, that you can learn from it, and you're learning from it by what you're reading. And I think that's important. One of the groups I'm in, somebody had asked, well, it's a Hoven group, and they asked, well, why are you here if you're an atheistard, as they put it? You know, why are atheists in a Kent Hoven group? Well, while I understand Kent Hoven's position, and I know it quite well, I want to know what you, the minions, actually believe, and why. I don't, you know, okay, I might understand Hoven, but why do you follow him like he's some demigod? And, you know, you're all for technology, but you're following a science denier. Why? Oh, I don't deny. Yes, you do. You're following one. And that's the thing, to try to understand the other side. And I'm not perfect at it, and I got a lot to learn, and I'm still learning. At least I hope I am. And some things I just don't get.
Well, it's like if somebody was to look at my YouTube subscribe list, they would be rather confused because
my friends list.
I have people on there that I don't like very much, but I like to keep one eye on what they're saying on occasion. And sometimes I admit sometimes I start watching stuff and I just am like, oh, I can't stand any more of this, and I turn it off because I get too frustrated by it sometimes. But I at least want to have a clue of what people are saying and putting out there, so that when somebody says, well, I think Sargon is awesome, I can be like, here's 10 ways why he's a total douchebag.
Well, I met him. Actually, I took a picture with him last year, and he had asked me about, well, do you know about James Damore? And I said, yeah, I've heard about it. And I hadn't read a lot about it, but I did watch a recent debate. But you know what is interesting? Do you know who the first programmers were?
Yeah.
Women. It was at the end of World War II.
Right.
And as they started this computer issue, the men were at war, a lot of them. And so they had women programmers. And after World War II, they had to keep hiring women because they were the only ones who knew how to do it. And I remember in the 80s that I was the director of the Community College Association. And I remember, as I met classified employees, the programmers a lot of them were women.
Yeah.
So if you look back at it, don't tell me women can't do it because they started it. Hello.
Well, there's this one meme, and I don't remember if it was an Apollo mission or exactly what it was, but there was a woman standing by a huge stack of papers that came up almost to the tip of her head, and it was the code she wrote to be able to send the space.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, why? And I have an aunt who was a contractor to NASA, and I didn't know about it. And she did a lot of the artwork that you see for NASA back in the 70s and 80s. She did. So it's not like I did not follow NASA, but still we don't hear about it.
Well, and remember the movie Rosie the Riveter? I saw it like 30 years ago, and I remember this woman who was put into service because the men were at war, and she learned how to weld. Mm-hmm. And of course, after the war, you need to go back in the house and have kids and all that kind of stuff. And the men took the jobs over. And she said, all I wanted to do was continue welding. I didn't care whether it was railings or staircases or garden art. That's all I wanted to do, and nobody would hire me. So I think we have to look historically at how some of these things have developed. They talk today about a lot of women are nurses. Well, in the 19th century, they were all men. The military would not admit women to be nurses on the field. Mm-hmm. So things go back and forth. The teachers originally were men before they were women. So let's put it in context. Let's look at it objectively and say, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And people have to be less afraid to look at the opposing viewpoint, I think, because there's a lot of this sort of, well, so-and-so has bad ideas, therefore one should ever look at them or talk to, like, and I don't necessarily think everybody deserves a platform, but when somebody gets a platform, I think, and my friend Ali Rizvi says this a lot, though, by making a huge fuss about it, you turn those people into martyrs that most of us don't deserve to be viewed that way.
I totally agree. And I have been watching her videos. I have limited myself to 50 hours. I'm not going to do more than that. But she's very articulate, and the points she makes are well researched. It's just the question, yeah, but why? And how did we get there? And what do we do to change that? And those kind of things. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, actually, you should check out the basics of street epistemology, though, because those types of things.
Absolutely.
Do it. And this is what I learned from Anthony last weekend. He's got a pyramid of epistemology. So the what you believe is the tiniest part. It has the least amount of importance. The why is the middle, and the how is the biggest. So how did you arrive at, and so he says what is the most important to him is what mechanism are people using to arrive at the conclusions and beliefs that they have.
Absolutely.
That might be a good way to attack it.
Anthony was really nice. I wanted to do something on street epistemology, and he hooked me up with 2 women who I interviewed. It was about a year or so ago. I did a blog on that, on their perspective, because of course my focus is on women. And fascinating.
It is. I'd seen people do it on videos before, but to have it broken down into the sort of nuts and bolts like that made a whole lot more sense. I don't know if I could be that nice about the way he is. As I say, I'm a little more direct than he is, but
I may have to take a Xanax before I do it.
Yeah. I'm like
to be really calm and going.
Yeah, like when people are going on and on, like there was one I watched where he talked to a couple of Mormons for over an hour. And I've talked to Mormons a few times, and I'm more of the, hey, wasn't that cool when in the Book of Mormon they had magic submarines with magic rock lights inside and stuff like that. Like I'm sort of mocking it at the same time, and
I think it'll be a real challenge. I've not done debates before. I've always thought I would love to debate William Lane Craig about women and religion. Now, I've put that out there a couple times, and I just haven't gotten a call from him yet.
That guy is so infuriating, though.
But
he was one of my adjunct professors.
The thing about debate is I'm not into all of the, what is it called? The straw man, the argument from this or that. I mean, I think I took speech in college. I can't remember, but that's not what it's about to me. And I don't think that's what it's about to her. So I think we'll have a good conversation. And they learned from last year. Melissa Chen is going to be the moderator. Okay. So they didn't have a moderator with Thomas Smith and Sargon of Akkad. So I think it would have done better. But, you got to be willing to engage with people who disagree with you. You just can't go to the all the atheist secular stuff and say, oh, these are people like me. It's great. I mean, that's important. But if you really want to change people's mind, you've got to talk to the people who don't agree with you. So we'll see.
I laugh when I'm in a debate group with theists and whatnot, and I get accused of wanting an echo chamber. And I'm like, if I wanted a fucking echo chamber, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. I have learned so many new words in the last 4 years. I cannot tell you. I mean, it is really amazing how many new words that I have learned.
This is good, though.
It's good. I have to absolutely have something to do. I retired in 2008. I spent 5 years doing my genealogy. And then I got into this because a friend of mine said, you need to write a book. And I said, the only thing I get pissed about is religion, and who knows what's later.
Sound like my dad when he retired, because my parents were all super, super duper active. I mean, they were elder hostel this, elder hostel that, traveling all over the world, yada, yada, yada. Mom's health started to deteriorate because she was like 9 years older than dad, but her hips started to go. I mean, she started to show her age. So dad kind of retired early. And the first 3 years, he said it was just hell on wheels because he didn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
So they started getting even more active.
Yeah.
Well,
I think if you've been that busy your whole life, it's hard just, I can't just sit and read mystery novels. I can't do that.
Yeah, my dad jokes with me. He goes, "So when are you retiring?" Because I'm getting close to that age. Although my brother's closer, and then he goes, "Oh, wait a minute, you're not going to retire, are you?" And I was like, "No," because if I didn't have work, I'd be like, I mean, the 10 months I was laid up when I blew my back out, I was like, I could only read so many books and play online for so long, and it's like, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't have any trouble doing nothing, but that's, I'm a low energy kind of person.
Yeah.
My parents do 100 times more things now than they did when they were working. Of course.
Well,
they're crazy. That's all right.
Yeah, if I could be productive, maybe I could. I mean, I have 3 books started, but none of them finished. Maybe I should take your route, Karen.
Well, I do want to add before we close.
Yes.
That there's going to be, after June 1st, when the book comes out, there's going to be a little button on my website, and you're going to be able to vote for women or religion.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's kind of a no-brainer in my book.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's a cool idea, though. A way to engage people.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I know I only kind of scanned and skimmed through your book, and I did read your first one. And actually, I'm going to go back and read the first essay again because it was like, because it got me to think. So I can just imagine what I find the fact that you're able to these stories out to people, and hopefully, more people will catch on to it, whether, you're third wave or first wave or whatever. I think it's just, like you said, it's important that women voices within atheism get heard.
Mm-hmm.
And not just because of the anti, being against religion per se, just because we are women.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I had this interesting experience. When I was in graduate school, I was a teaching assistant, and we had a union. We became part of the American Federation of Teachers. Mm-hmm. And in 1980, we went on strike. And the women who were the teaching assistants had a separate meeting. And I had been president. I was real active. I was one of the 2 spokespeople during the strike. So I went to the meeting, and one of the first things a woman said was, "We need to have somebody to speak for us." And I raised my hand. I said, the guys are not having a meeting about who to speak for them. If they want to say something, they say something. So if you have something to say at a membership meeting, you say it. Don't expect somebody else to say it for you. And I was so surprised because it was such a group of educated women, but who weren't used to having their voices heard. And, that was 40 years ago. So you need to speak out. I'm totally convinced that Emma Gonzalez is going to be president. Now, I'm not going to be here 18 years from now when she turns 36, because you have to be 36 to run president, But I love seeing that. I love seeing people learn early on that their voices have to be heard and to speak out. That is an education that's invaluable.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's the thing. I mean, as a platform, it's not huge, whether it's my blog, whether it's here, but I've never been, I'm shy in person, but when I can hide behind my computer screen, I just think it's so important that not just women, everybody's voice is heard. Yeah. But I think, speak out. I mean, if something goes against the grain, speak out about it. I mean, like the conversation I had, we kind of sort of agreed to disagree about our views towards abortion. And I said, well, what would you rather have? Safe abortions, whether you agree or disagree, or what I remember from back in 70, 71, 72, granted I was awfully young, but I remember back alley abortions. I remember reading about them in the Buffalo News.
Yeah.
Of them going bad.
There will always be abortions. The only issue is whether they're legal and safe.
Yeah. Yep. And it's like, and it doesn't just have to be that issue. It can be any issue. I mean, it's just, going last week, last weekend was a quote vacation for me. And it's like, I got back the first day I got back on the computer, I was like, well, seems the crazies haven't taken one. Yeah. It's like, it's just, I was like, wow. But yeah, people like Emma Gonzalez, people like Amanda Scott, people like Morgan, Claire Brake, our young people are the future. And I agree with you. I can see Emma as being our president in 16, 17 years.
Yeah, that girl's amazing. Every time
and David Hogue is her vice president.
Absolutely.
I'll get a little political there.
That kid is awesome too. But, and what gets me is, that the right-wing nut jobs are scared because they're trying to diss those kids.
Oh, badly.
They're terrible.
Some of the stuff I've seen today.
I saw one. It's like, Emma's Cuban, and she had a Cuban flag on her jacket. And
absolutely. It's Castro.
Communist symbol, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, she's fucking Cuban.
So I've got to tell you, I can smell dinner.
Okay.
My husband's cooking dinner.
That's okay.
It's tempting me away. But I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. And if there's anything else you need from me, any links or something, you let me know.
Absolutely. Well, please tell everyone where they can find your first book and your blog and all of that fun stuff.
Oh, well, my blog is faithlessfeminist.com. It's the same name as my YouTube channel, which I have a few things up on that, not a lot because I don't regularly do it. And my first book is Women Beyond Belief, Discovering Life Without Religion on Amazon. And the new book is Women versus Religion, The Case Against Faith and for Freedom.
And this
that's the first one.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, definitely we appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. And
it's wonderful.
It is, absolutely. I wish you were a little closer to hang out at cons more.
Yeah, and I is NoCon every year?
NanoCon, yes.
Okay, I thought it was NanoCon because it was Nashville. It's not. It's always NanoCon.
Well, it's Nashville Nuns Conference.
It's always in Nashville?
Yes.
Oh, I've never been there. I'll come next year.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, I'll come.
Yay.
Never been to Nashville. Oh, that'll be cool.
And next year is ReasonCon in North Carolina, too.
Oh, now I have friends in North Carolina. I got to write that one down.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in Hickory, North Carolina.
In Hickory, ReasonCon. Okay. I got to asked to do my presentation. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And
no, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Oh no, Beth, Beth and I are just gonna plug our stuff. So if
cool. Well, thanks again. It was wonderful. It was a great time.
Thanks, Karen.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Beth, where do we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune9998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos, and I just posted another 30 abuses in the church and got 30 more to post. Oh, as I said, the crazies did not take a vacation.
Nope.
But and one of the stories really literally struck home for me because, granted, I know the problem with the Catholic Church is not just it hit Buffalo and it hit hard. 45 priests.
Oh, geez.
And it's just in some ways it's kind of shocking. And it also has a local tie here where I live in buttfuck nowhere. So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, that connects to the blog Havoc and Chaos, and you can find me on YouTube. I have not put out anything new. I am working on something. And you can find me on Facebook under the same names, Beth A. Hambridge.
All right.
And where can we find you?
Well, there's always Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, which is Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. And you can find that at holycrapthevlogcast.com. And we actually spent some time the other night talking about conferences and community and how important all of that is to everybody, not just activist type peoples. And of course, you can also find me trying desperately to read the Quran in King James English at fullquranic.com. And let me tell you, that's a barrel of laughs and a half. But I'm going to read it so you don't have to. There's that. And of course, we'll be back here next week. And if you may have noticed, we probably said at some point we were going to do Sovereign Citizen Bingo this week, but I got talking to Karen and this just worked better for her to do tonight. So we're going to look at doing Sovereign Citizen Bingo next week. And I'm going to see if I can rope some fellow podcasters in to join us while we laugh at sovereign citizens, which is going to be lots of fun. So until then, I think that about does it. We will leave you with the humanist creed, and we'll see everybody next week.
Peace, y'all.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.